Cold open question of the day. Chris Manning, Wes Goldberg, Brendon Kleen on the Just Basketball Show. Guys, I was flipping through Instagram the other night, and I realized I follow a bunch of random NBA players, including like Ty Jerome, who Brendon also follows. Do you guys have a most random NBA player you feel like you follow off the top of your head without like even like looking, and then maybe we can check it? Mine was Norris Cole and Ty Jerome. Those were the two I was like, I'm not exactly sure why I follow both of these people. But do you guys have one that comes to mind for you?
I do. Kai Bowman, who played 1 year for the Warriors, the first year that I was covering them for the San Jose Mercury News. He was undrafted out of, I want to say, Mississippi State. Talked with that thick Mississippi accent. Couldn't understand a word he said, but he was always really willing to do interviews because he was like an undrafted guy just trying to make the team, so he was doing whatever he could. And so he was one of the players we interviewed the most that year where Steph Curry had a broken hand and Klay Thompson was out because of the finals injury, and Draymond Green was like basically taking the year off. So he was a guy that was one of the first players to follow me when I was on the beat. So I followed him back, and then we follow each other on Instagram and stuff like that. And I still think I follow him.
Okay.
I unfollow people on Twitter regularly that are old NBA players that I had no idea or recollection that I followed. I think actually another Warrior was one of the more recent ones. I think Maurice Spates.
Oh, yeah.
I followed on Twitter. If you were on Twitter early in Twitter, those types of people would just post a lot. So it wasn't actually weird or crazy to be following like athletes. Now it's just like their promos for some like off-brand cleaning product that they're doing some partnership with, or like some camp or something. But like 15 years ago, it was like, well, I kind of probably wanted to be following Maurice Spates. I couldn't tell you why, but he probably said something relevant. Now it just feels like a mistake.
Yeah, when NBA players like post anything now that's at all related to like what's actually happening in the world, and not like sick vacation photos or them working out, it's normally like, why you really did need to post this. Like when Kyle Kuzma, like 2 weeks ago, posted wondering like why the Democrats got rid of Biden. I was like,
well, or even anything relevant to like basketball thoughts, or forget world events, but like there was a time when like these guys would have said, oh, the zone that Team USA just threw out with Embiid, pretty impressive, and it's like, all right, that's kind of relevant, like I'll follow it, but even that's gone.
Instagram kind of stole all the basketball players from Twitter. Right now they just sort of post all those vacation photos on Instagram, and it's all that kind of thing that they're using that. It's much better for the hashtag branding on Instagram. There's a lot more opportunity there, and it just feels like basketball players don't tweet as much. Even the ones with podcasts are really just tweeting links to their podcasts. It's not much.
Yeah. That's
relevant there.
That's what Instagram's for too, frankly. It's just like their social media team just like clipping up clips of Podcast P or the Roommate Show. It's like that's what it's for.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the real answer to what you're saying, Wes, is that nobody really tweets anymore, and that website's kind of hollowed out and fake, unfortunately.
Except for Kevin Durant.
Except for Kevin Durant.
True. There you go.
Keeping the platform alive.
KD.
Brendan's going to be at Locked On Suns forever, just being able to get an episode of KD tweets. And frankly, that's just one of the blessings in NBA podcasting, if we're being honest. Yep. All right. On today's show, Lauri Markannen latest, Olympic latest. And we're going to look back at Gordon Hayward. That's coming up on today's Just Basketball Show.
Oh, a spectacular move by Michael Jordan. LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Hey there. Welcome into the Just Basketball Show. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. That is Wes Goldberg. Want to tell you at the top that Brendon, we're having a little audio thing with Brendon, so if you're listening, if you're watching, it might sound a little different than normal. We're just pressing on. We're like a banged up NBA team in the Eastern Conference Finals or something, just making it.
Talking about my Miami Heat already. It's crazy.
Unbelievable. Does that mean Brendon's Jimmy Butler?
Of course.
Okay. Jimmy Butler posting lots of good vacation photos on Instagram right now. He's like, I'm still in Europe. I'm like, Jimmy Butler, if I were you, I would also still be in Europe. I want to tell you that support for today's episode of the Just Basketball Show comes from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code JustBasketball and you get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here is how it works. Step 1, download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android and sign up using code JustBasketball. Step 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. Step 3, you receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. Just make sure to use bonus code JustBasketball when you sign up. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older to wager. Terms and conditions apply. Guys, let's start with Lauri Markannen, who could be traded this week. He also could sign an extension this week. We could find out that he's going to be with the Utah Jazz for the longest time, and it seems like, based on the latest reporting from Mark Stein, from speculation from Warriors media, from Jazz media, and whatnot, to me, it does not sound like we're going to get a Lauri Markanen trade, and I like this for this specific reason. I think it has to do, to some degree, with Lauri Markanen flexing his own power a little bit here. Lauri Markanen, if he signs the extension on the 6th, the first day he can sign it, he creates a window where he has no control over where he's going to be. If he waits to the 7th, to the 8th, to the 9th, to 10th, whatever, he gets control. And from covering him a little bit in Cleveland, from kind of reading all the reporting about him in Utah, he's not a guy that I think likes the idea of just bouncing around a lot, even if it means competing for titles. I think he just wants to be settled down. I know guys will say that and then they get traded and they're like, oh, I'm happy to compete for a title, play with Steph, play with Draymond, whatever, play for Kerr. But I do kind of believe in this case that Markanen might just want to be in Utah, and that might be kind of the root of why this maybe hasn't gotten done up to this point.
Yeah, I think if you look at his end of season press conference remarks, he wants to be in Utah, but the key word there was he wanted to win in Utah. And so he's going to sign this extension. It's going to take him basically off the table until next summer, right? Because he's going to wait until, it sounds like, at least with the reporting around it, he's going to wait until after August 6th, which would make him ineligible to get traded for the rest of the season because of CBA, blah, blah, blah. That's all you really need to know. And then he's going to be available next summer, potentially, to get, if he were to get traded, the next time he could get traded would be next summer. And that might be the time where he gets traded, right? Because the Utah Jazz, it feels like, might have to show something here, because the being in Utah part, that's one half of the equation, and we settled that with the extension if he does indeed sign it. The second part of the equation, the winning team in Utah, that part is not there yet, right? That they're very much not a winning basketball team, and maybe they get Cooper Flagg next summer, and then boom, that's enough to keep Lauri Markanen there. My point is, I'm not trying to predict that he's going to get traded. It's just saying that if and when they do sign him to this extension, there's going to be another part to this. There has to be another part to this, because there's no reason to have Lauri Markanen if you're not building a winner around him. Otherwise, you should just trade him. There's no point in doing this. So the Jazz clearly want to keep him. Markanen clearly wants to stay there. To your point, Chris, this is sort of like an offshoot of the player empowerment thing, right? Where he's like, well, I'll just wait a couple more days and then sign it, so that way you can't trade me, and at least I know where I'm going to call home for the next 10 months of my life. But it just feels like something else has to happen. And Brendon, I don't really know what that is. Is that a trade this summer? Is that a trade between the now and the deadline? Is it something next summer? I don't really know, but it doesn't feel like this doesn't feel like the punctuation to the sentence to me.
It can't be. I think you're right. To me, we are only talking about the difference between February and June or July. That's the control he's getting by signing this extension on his own terms. It's not as if he's locking in the rest of his career here, right? So to me, the bigger ripple effect of him playing hardball in this way is just doing it at all. He is basically forcing the Jazz to do something different than they've been doing, and pushing up against the status quo, which I think all of us watching this team for the past couple of years now have been pretty confused by, where they're punching above their weight for 4 months, and then all of a sudden they kind of remember that they're not supposed to be good, and then they shut all their veteran guys down, which is all good. A lot of teams do that, but on top of that, you have all these other players, even aside from Markanen, who I'm not sure why they're still even on the team, like Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton, and then they make the trade for John Collins. So
John Collins one feels like a mistake in general. That feels like they just messed that up in retrospect too.
For sure. He wasn't good. He hampered Walker Kessler's development. He couldn't really fit on the court, did not play any better. It was even worse in Atlanta. But to me, it's him doing this is more about him forcing them to pick a direction than it is about I'm going to get to play from February to April in Utah instead of Golden State or whatever. That matters, but we're still going to be talking about this all year. even if he can't be traded at the deadline and it'll just come up again next June. So
Yeah.
I like to think of it more as what it's telling us about the Jazz. Do they finally overpay for somebody that can play next to him and improve this team, or do they maybe start to tear down and at least get rid of the other vets and show him, hey, we're rebuilding, but you're still the guy at the middle of that? That's what I think they have to do if they are committed to just keeping Markkanen on this team, is they have to pick what the rest of it's going to look like.
And I think if they are committed to Markkanen, and I will say, like, I think Markkanen flexing his power, I think that is also, he is probably going to, that's power, that's the most a guy like him can flex his power. So at least I applaud it for that. Like, obviously, he can't control if he gets traded in a year, but this is the most he can do, and I kind of respect. It's like a quasi no trade clause. It's like the opposite of what Jared Allen did, which Mark Stein, in the same way he reported about Markkanen, basically said, like, I don't expect the Jared Allen trade scuttlebutt to go away. And Jared Allen, like, opened the window for himself to be traded this year. So there's a little more wiggle room for Cleveland there if that ends up happening. I also I would say on the Markkanen side, Brendan, to your point about trading the other guys, the Jazz, I feel like, are also in a position, but if they wanted to, and Danny Ainge historically maybe has not been the guy to want to operate this way, but if they wanted to just get off of Clarkson, get off of Sexton, get off of John Collins in some way, if those deals are out there, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't, they could take like 85 cents on the dollar because they have all these other picks still. They have all these other assets. They don't need to get like a good first for Clarkson or like a first for Sexton or something. They don't really need to do that. It would almost be beneficial, to your point, to just remove those guys out of the ecosystem, restructure the team, let Keontae George cook this year, let Walker Kessler get back to normal, do whatever you got to do, and then try to get in the Cooper Flaggers. Try to have a top pick next year, and then have all these picks if you wanted to aggressively move up. Probably not to get flagged, but someone else you like in that draft next year. You do that without needing to get back great stuff back for these older, more expensive guys. That's a tenable path. The question I think that no one knows is like what Danny Ainge actually wants here. What is Danny Ainge's plan? We have no idea what he's really up to with that team, and that kind of that's probably the biggest cloud to me here is what does Danny Ainge actually believe about what the way forward is here.
Well, we got rumors that he wanted in on Paul George.
Exactly.
Rumors that he wanted in and Mikal Bridges. And that's the thing about Ainge is he's not gonna close any of the doors. Door A and door B are both open, and it's just gonna be a matter of timing and which door just makes more sense at the moment. I do think if the right deal came along, that they would have traded Lauri Markanen in that right deal. Now, I'm a little hesitant to go fully in on like, well, if the Warriors just included Brandon Budzynski in the deal, then we would have had something done. Something about that just doesn't feel totally solid to me. But whatever, like if the Warriors or whatever other team.
Yeah, the report right now is they haven't wanted to include either of their young guys, which to me just says the Warriors are basically doing what Danny Ainge does to everybody else.
Right, yeah. Exactly. And there's also reporting now that Lauri Markanen has signed that extension that he might have more trade value to other teams across the league. So to Brendan's point earlier, we're only going to be trying to figure out over the next several months, all right, when he does become trade eligible, which team makes the most sense if the Jazz don't do something in the short term. Now, I don't know what that short-term deal is. I also know there's 3 months to go until the start of the NBA season, and there's a lot that can happen. And then I do wonder, based on how many teams were sort of reportedly in on Markkanen, if there was maybe this weird holding pattern going on, almost similar to the Paul George one that we saw, where as soon as we get a resolution to that situation, you have a domino effect of other things that just sort of fall into place afterwards. Now, once Markkanen is off the table, he signed the contract extension, he's not trade eligible right now, I wonder if something other things sort of unlocks across the league. I have no idea what it is. I'm not even all that interested in speculating as to what it might be. But teams like Golden State, San Antonio, Oklahoma City, like all these teams that are sort of rumored to be in on Lauri Markkanen, I wonder if they look in another direction now.
Or just the other stuff we know has to happen around the league, right? Like the Pelicans are an unfinished team, right, and the Nets have all these guys we thought they were going to be selling off the minute Mikal went to the Knicks, which was a month and a half ago at this point on draft day or draft week. So there is a ton of stuff we've been waiting for that's just not happened. And I don't think it has to be directly tied to Utah or Golden State in order for some of it to just shake loose once there's some kind of clarity. I don't even think it has to be Markkanen signing this extension. It could just be if Tuesday, August 6th comes and goes and that basically eliminates the deadline deal and everything. Like, it just, that at least is like information that these teams can just say, okay, that's not an option, let's go for it. So I don't even think Markkanen has to do anything. It's almost like what he doesn't do. That could just make stuff start happening elsewhere.
On the Warriors side of this, do you guys think there is an onus for them to have to, if the Markkanen thing doesn't happen, do you think there's an onus for them to go do something aggressive before the season starts to put a more competitive team around Curry or around Draymond in this post-Claire? Do you think they have to go do something, or can they run into next season and say, we believe in the next step of Podziemski, the next step of Kuminga, we have Curry, we have Draymond, we have Kerr, we are going to be okay, and we can be patient. Where do you guys think of where they have to go next?
I think you already know the answer to this, but it sort of like depends on what's out there, right?
Sure.
I mean, if I were them, I would maybe quietly, aggressively be shopping Jonathan Kuminga. I have had my doubts about his fit in Golden State. I think could be a really good player in a vacuum one day. I don't think it'll ever happen with the Warriors. I think that, and he's got this extension coming up that they're going to have to deal with, and playing time and all these things. And it feels like that's a situation that could go south. And I think his value is pretty high across the league right now. I think there's a lot of Kuminga believers that would be interested in being like, well, what does he look like for us with room to grow where he doesn't have in Golden State? I would be trying to shop him and maybe making an upgrade, but again, it's for what? For somebody like Markkanen, that does make sense to me. I don't know what the next version of that. Brandon Ingram obviously is not that guy.
Yeah, it's a horrible fit.
I don't really know who else would be that guy, but if that's not out there, I'm okay if I'm Golden State, just kind of going into the year. They're not a championship contender, but we've talked about this before on this show. I don't think that that's where the goalposts need to be posted. I think you could just move them back and or move them forward, or however that metaphor works, and just say, you know what, let's just get Steph Curry out of the first round, or at least try, and that's good enough for us this year, and we can reevaluate stuff next summer. But for now, yeah, I wouldn't be. And it didn't sound like they were desperate to try to get Markkanen in the first place if they weren't including all their young guys anyway. I wouldn't like move my level of desperation anywhere, but I would be now if the Markkanen thing is off the table. I would be aggressively looking at other options. Not to say that and that doesn't mean the same thing as being desperate to make a move. It's just making a lot of phone calls.
Yeah, to me, what they need is just offensive creation, even if it's not efficient or not a long-term piece or anything like that. So I can kind of see why they are hesitant to include Podziemski. Maybe the part of it of if he's the future building block or if his upside is as high as Kuminga's, that might not even be the right conversation to be having, although they do seem to be really high on him, and he tweeted 2028 like he's about to be on the Olympic team in 4 years, which is a great goal, but I think it's getting a little crazy with the hype around him. But I think it's more about they just need him right now. They need him on this team. They need him to be some kind of additional offense next to Steph that honestly even Markkanen isn't, in the way of just give him the ball and let him, create his own shot. Markkanen's an off-ball scorer. So whether they get him, whether they don't, I'm trying to keep as much offensive creation as I can on this roster in the process or add more of it if I can. And kind of like Wes, I'm not exactly sure who that is. I don't honestly think the Ingram fit is awful. I just think it doesn't really make sense for a Kuminga trade, and, Wiggins is still on this roster and everything else. But somebody like Ingram I wouldn't hate, even if it's not a perfect fit, just because of how badly I think they need somebody to score the ball, especially as I watch Steph Curry struggle to do exactly that, who's supposed to be the only guy who can do it on this roster while he's in Paris. They need offense in a really bad way.
The Ingram thing I don't like just because I think, he just maybe has never quite figured out the even a version of the kinetic bounce the ball around, like keep things moving kind of style. And number two, I just can't imagine Steve Kerr would be super enthused about that after the Team USA experience. And like that to me just feels like two ships that cross at that one point and now they're going their different ways, and we can just like leave that be. But I understand your point. The roster right now, this just feels like a top 8 for them. Curry, Moses Moody, Wiggins, Podziemski, Kuminga, Draymond, D'Anthony Melton, Kyle Anderson, Buddy Hield. And then you have got Gary Payton II on there. Kevon Looney's around still. Trace Jackson-Davis around there. That's your 10th. That feels like, right now to me, you look at that and you think about the names. You think about the lack of maybe another good center option right now, because considering the age of Looney and just only having Draymond there. That feels like a team to me that's going to be struggling to Wes's point, like get out of the first round. Like that feels like a playing team in the loaded West right now. Like that,
Yeah.
and that would scare me a little bit if I'm them.
Yeah, I think if you're the Warriors, you're hoping that you just get a really great Steph, great Draymond, and maybe a bounce back Andrew Wiggins year, and then you get some internal growth, and that solves some of your problems. But that's the reason, again, to Brendan's point, why you keep somebody like Pods on the team is they don't really have much of anything other than an identity. So you're trying to keep as much as that identity in place as possible, right? Like they don't have, outside of Steph, top level scoring. I don't know if this is going to be a top 10 offense, which sounds crazy because
I
the Warriors,
don't think
right?
it will.
Like
I don't think it will.
I don't think it's going to be a top 10 defense because this team lacks a lot of size. But the one thing that they do have is a little bit like what the Pacers had last year in terms of we just have style of play and we're trying to double down. I don't know if they're going to, but I guess that's the idea is, we've made some changes. We're going to double down on style of play and we're going to try to take teams by surprise in that way. But I agree. They need size. They probably need extra shot creation, more scoring, and things like that. I just don't really know where it comes from. Is this a team that can go out and make an offer for D'Angelo Russell? Like, they've done that already, but these are the names of the guys. Like, they're not going to do the Zach LaVine thing. That much has been out there already. There's just not a whole lot of guys that are out there right now, at least from the outside. You never know. Like, stuff happens in the NBA that we don't see coming. But it just sort of feels like this is the group. And I'm looking at the roster after you read it off, Chris. I think they're going to be relying on something like what the Knicks formula was last year, where it's like one dude do all of the scoring, keep us above water, and everybody else just play really good defense. And we're going to just try to kind of apply our style of play on the game. Obviously, they're not going to play like the Knicks, but it's going to be let's apply our style on the game. Let's get one guy to just go off offensively, and everybody else does all the other things on defense.
How would you guys feel about Jeremy Grant? We'll end on this. Jeremy Grant been linked more to the Lakers.
Yeah.
Is there like a Wiggins, Jeremy Grant, like big contract swap thing that can make some sense?
I mean, what is Wiggins, like 2 years shorter than Grant? So, I don't know. That would feel like something of I think that would be good for Golden State. Grant isn't really a second scorer. He kind of strikes me more as a third scorer, but I guess beggars can't be choosers. But if you're Portland, that still feels like selling a little bit low on Jeremy Grant because you're just you're trading away a bad contract, bringing back so Wiggins is only a year shorter. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense for Portland. Yeah, you're basically paying $3 million less a year to Wiggins, which is inconsequential to Portland for a year less. I don't know. Unless Golden State's throwing in 2 first-round picks, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, to me, it feels like Golden State is outside of a star-level trade, which I think, part of why the marketing thing's so fascinating is that you could say it is or isn't that. But other than a move of that caliber, specifically a trade, they're kind of just in a holding pattern until Steph's contract and then the year after that, Draymond's contract come up. Draymond said on a separate podcast this past week that he is likely to retire after this current deal. We don't know what the future of Steph is. His game will age better, but contract-wise, they're not going to really be able to create cap space until Steph's off the books. They don't really have a lot of other means to do anything. It's just, can you turn, the Wiggins contract or some of these other ones into something, or is this just kind of the team for the time being? And
it sounds a lot like the Miami Heat situation, doesn't it? They're both sort of in similar positions where the Warriors have their number one guy in Steph Curry, at least for now, but they don't have anything close to a number 2 or really a number 3 guy, depending on what we want to call Draymond Green. And then the Heat have basically the perfect number 2 guy, the perfect number 3 guy, great depth, all this stuff, but they're just lacking the number 1 guy. If you just combine both of these rosters, now I think you really got something. But I don't know. It does. Like, maybe they're in a holding pattern for a year. Maybe they're in a holding pattern until the trade deadline, where one of these teams, like, I don't know, if Miami is 6 games under 500 in January, do they start to look at maybe shopping Jimmy Butler before he opts out of his contract next summer? Because that's the guy that does make sense for Golden State, and he's sort of a win now guy, and you can move some of these young pieces to a retooling Miami team, and you get your guy. I don't know. I don't really know what the Warriors want to do because, like the Heat, both teams are like, well, we have our guy, we have our face of the franchise, but we don't really want to overcommit on the present because we understand that the shelf life on this is really short. And if we overcommit in the short term, that could really screw us down the road. And we're just not willing to really do that. So both of these teams are just sort of like, I don't know. Let's just hope we get some Golden State Warriors magic or Miami Heat culture that just, lightning in a bottle in the playoffs and see what happens. But again, that 2022 championship run for the Warriors, the 2023 run for the Miami Heat to the finals, it just feels like sort of the last thing for both of those sort of teams, like that for those windows, right? And now we're just sort of playing it out, and it's weird to see it in person. It'll look a lot less weird like 10 years from now when we look back on it.
And I think too, like, this happens to stars. Like, this just does. This is inevitable with the face of the league. Heck, Kobe at the end was not playing for great teams. LeBron is not going to be, I don't think, competing for a championship before this is said and done with him in the next year or two. Michael, I know he went out with the Bulls, but he comes back at the Wizards, and you can't just like the name guy at the end of his career historically does not get to like keep doing this at the highest level. Curry got to play it at a higher level and compete for more titles than just about anyone of his era, and you kind of just get those amount of shots. It might just be it, and that is your point was kind of weird to grapple with. All right, let's go to the Olympics. I want to start outside of Team USA for a second because I just want to say that I think France-Canada is everything I want in a quarterfinals. Like, when we think about getting out of group stage, getting into the best teams in the world in Olympic basketball, this is what I want. These are both teams that have, I think, a lot on the line in this tournament. Mm-hmm. That would like to Canada's like a validation of this continuing project for them to become one of the best Olympic programs, international men's programs in the world. France is at home. This is Victor Wembanyama's first Olympics. They have Gobert. They have, they're obviously lacking guard play and all this stuff, but like I love that game and the way this broke out, that we're getting this now. Yes, the other games are going to have, for the gold medal, the bronze, the silver, all that's going to have more stakes and more lasting value, but I love that we're getting a quarterfinals game that feels like it has a lot of weight to it right out of the gate, right out of group play. That to me is the most exciting thing that we're getting among these quarters matchups.
Who do you think of the underdogs has the best chance to upset in this round? So you already mentioned Canada and France, and I agree with everything you said. I mean, France is a 7.5-point underdog at home. That might be the best bet, but I'm looking at Germany 7.5-point underdogs, or I'm sorry, Greece 7.5-point underdogs to Germany. Australia is playing Serbia. Serbia is a 6.5-point favorite, and then the U.S. is over Brazil is like a 1 billion-point favorite.
So yeah, I'll give you the full odds from our friends at BetMGM. We got Greece and Germany spreads at 8.5 there. Germany is minus 350 on the money line. Greece plus 250. Serbia, Australia. Serbia is a 7.5-point favorite. They are minus 275 on the money line. Australia is plus 220. Canes and France, a 7.5-point underdog. They are a plus 240 money line dog. Canada minus 300. And then Brazil and Team USA. USA is a 27.5-point favorite, and they are a minus 10,000 on the money line. Brazil plus 1,600 on the money line. I just will say I have really enjoyed all of the Team USA coverage where they have talked up the threat of Brazil, despite the fact that I don't think there's like a real threat for Brazil.
To answer
my
my
answer
own
is
question,
Greece.
My
answer is Greece.
Yes. I think the answer is Greece because you've got Giannis is going to be the best player on the court. It might, I don't know. Germany is a tough draw for them in general because Germany just has like a lot of size up front with the Wagners, with Daniel Tice and all these things. And Greece, I don't know. I think I have the stat right. They have not made a three like since they've been in Paris. They cannot shoot the ball.
Yeah.
And Germany has like the Steph Curry of Germany, Obst on their team. So it feels like that could be.
What is that like? The Steph Curry of Germany that's just one of the funniest phrases I've ever heard. That's like you got Steph Curry on Wish is really what you just said.
Is Wish a German platform?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't know what the German equivalent of like Wish or Temu is. I feel like Germans might think of themselves like above those kinds of things.
Sure, they tend to do that.
Yeah, quality.
So I'm also looking at Australia and Serbia in terms of maybe some upset factor there, only because, and I wouldn't bet it, but Australia will shoot a lot of threes, and they're a better three-point shooting team than Serbia is. And I just wonder if that's a game where Australia can come in and just say, you know what, let's just try to win this thing with math. Both teams play in the open floor a lot, so it feels like this is a game that could be played at a really fast pace. And if you're just trying to jack up a bunch of threes, that could be beneficial to Australia. So I might go Australia in terms of having the best upset chance here, but Greece is another good pick.
It's funny to me watching I mean, we've talked about it in our preview, but it has kind of panned out this way where so many teams are lacking rim protection and just interior size, and that dictates so much of who's able to win. But then in this particular matchup, it feels like those teams that do have that are going up against teams
Right.
that can bomb threes. So that's kind of what stuck out to me about this draw is like Germany is a team we know can get hot. They don't really have an answer for Giannis, but yet they might not have to worry about that. France has all this, and they're like the one team that actually has athleticism and size inside with both Gobert and Vic, but Canada has all these perimeter guys, Dylan Brooks, Lou Dort, still throwing flames, and then obviously Shea and Jamal Murray and everything. So it's just kind of a cool clash, I would say. But back to the Canada-France part of it, I think the interesting part of that matchup to me, and just those two teams to me, Vic has done exactly what we expected. He's grabbed the offense by the horns and kind of made his imprint on everything. The crowd loves him. But it's Jamal Murray.
Mm-hmm.
He is not playing great. Like, this is not going how you would want it to go. And it's 6 points and 5 assists per game. So credit to him to being more of a playmaker and only, 20 minutes a night. But he's shooting 33% from the field, 10% from three. All these are very small sample, obviously, goes without saying. But you just think back to the playoffs where he was physically not right and could only muster like a couple of fourth quarters really in totality to really make a big impact on any of that postseason run. They fall short in the second round. Now that extension we all thought was inevitably coming is still lingering there. He had some comments about that, I believe, or there was at least some reporting around it. I'm not saying the guy's gone or anything crazy like that, but I'm just saying it's been a not great 6 months for Jamal Murray, and I thought this would be a perfect environment for it to just click back into place, and he's getting to play off of another great player and this first opportunity to make his mark on the Canadian squad and all this stuff, and it's just been an even bigger struggle. So I think, it's not like I'm going to worry about an all-star caliber guy just based off that, but it's not great, and it is a pretty important time in his career with that big max extension awaiting him.
I mean, to that point, it's like Andrew Nembhard played more minutes and was better from the field and more efficient and just frankly better than Jamal Murray in a very close win against Spain. That that's like a possible one-off kind of thing, but Nembhard's just been better this entire tournament, and that would scare me a little bit. I want to talk myself into France as a pick over Canada, and I think I could see it being like a good bet as far as the spread goes. Their guard play, just even with like Murray not being great, it's like having to do with Shea and Dort and Nembhard and Brooks at the guard and the wing spots for what they have at those spots. That just feels like too much of an uphill battle unless Victor Wembanyama is going to have like the Olympic game of his life, and that's possible. But
and France has the worst guard play among the group.
Exactly.
Point Evan Fournier did not work. Right.
Nope.
Like there's a lot of things struggling, or a lot of guards struggling right now for France, and kind of to Brendan's point earlier, like whatever advantage they might have at the front line with Gobert and Victor Wembanyama might not matter because we might not ever get that far because the guards for Canada just take over, right? One other just weird sort of X's and O's thing that I'm thinking about in this game is, well, not necessarily X's and O's, but rotation thing is Kelly Olynyk has barely played, right? He's basically playing 10, 11 minutes a game in these Olympics right now, and it kind of feels like his stretch potential could be really useful against this French front line. I don't think he'll get the start, but I wonder how much, if we'll see him a little bit more in this game, even playing with Dwight Powell or whatever it might be, to just spread the floor out a little bit more while also adding some size. It's just one thing I'm looking at there, but the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander part of this, how well he's looked, or how good he's looked and how well he's played, I just don't know that France has an answer for him. And unless they, do you put Victor Wembanyama on Shai? I don't know.
You might have to. It's either that or it's like, all right, Bilal Coulibaly, let's throw you to the Wolves in your first Olympics. And it's like, that's not going to work. Throwing Frankie Ntilikina on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for 20 minutes after he's not played a ton for them.
That was one of
Not
the
gonna work.
previews. One of the previews I read was like, we could see some Frank Ntilikina in this game. I was like, oh, good. Yeah, everything's fine for France. Never mind.
Nick's NBA legend, like Frankie Smokes, is the rehabilitation tour starts now for Frankie Smokes.
I guess
Maybe.
so.
I don't know. Brendan, you're gonna say something. Really?
If I were to just ask you who's older between Trey Lyles and Dylan Brooks, who would you say?
This feels like a trick question. So
This
I'm gonna
feels
go
like
Trey
I
Lyles.
this feels like it's actually Trey Lyles, even though I think Dylan Brooks is like Dylan Brooks to me has always felt like 35.
Oh, see, I see it the exact opposite. I feel like Trey Lyles has been in the league for 15 years. I thought everybody felt the same way. I was just looking and realizing that Trey Lyles is only 28, and in my head, he's like toward the end of his career. So I was trying to throw it your guys' way as a trick question in the other direction. But
Reverse
I
psychology.
just watch him out there. He just moves so slowly. You
Yeah.
know, it's like you can't convince me that guy's in his athletic prime. I mean, all respect, he makes a lot of money. I don't think he cares what I have to say, but I would not have guessed 28 years old for Trey Lyles.
Can we go back to the Jamal Murray part of this? Because I
Yes.
think it's worth exploring. Like, the Olympics are not over, and it feels like he needs a big game. And his regular season was fine for Denver. His playoffs were really bad. He shot 40% overall in the playoffs. We were there. We watched it. We know it was a struggle for him. And I don't know. I was talking with somebody who covers the Denver Nuggets, and a question he just asked me was, "Is Jamal Murray just bad now?" Because there's no other there's no other explanation for it, right? And this is a guy who's going to be up for a contract pretty soon. It's a very weird development, and it's not being talked about enough. And you know what? I shouldn't say it's not being talked about enough. It's not being covered yet. But if this goes on for a few more months into the regular season, and we're in January and February, and Murray hasn't snapped out of whatever funk this is, then I think it will become a talking point of, is he really the number 2 around Nikola Jokic in Denver going forward? Because you can look at the cap sheet. It doesn't take a rocket science. You look at the cap sheet, and you're going to, eventually something's got to give, right? You're going to say, one of these guys is going to have to go. There's just no way. But I don't think anybody ever pointed at maybe Jamal Murray being that guy. We always talk about Michael Porter Jr. trade ideas. I think we've done 2 different shows on Michael Porter Jr. trade ideas here on the Just Basketball show. But I don't know. Maybe Murray's the guy. He's the one with the contract expiring. It seems like the easiest get out of jail free card version of this. It's just something I'm monitoring.
It feels impossible to think that you would ever want to separate those two, but there's people around Denver, reporters, analysts, who have commented that 2-man game, is it predictable or whatever. I've seen some articles about that, and I think regardless of that, I wouldn't say I notice it, but they're closer. If Jamal Murray lower body, I don't even know if it's injuries, but if he's just not himself because of lower body stuff and he's just physically hampered in any kind of way, it's not hard to understand why that would make him a less impactful player. I mean, he's all about acceleration, deceleration, positioning and angles, and I'm going to hug the screen downhill this time, and this time I'm going to pull up, and this time I'm going to the mid-range, and you're never quite going to know.
On the floater. Yeah.
And obviously pull-up jumper is such a big thing for him. That requires a lot of lower body strength, so he's not exactly somebody who is a super high-volume three-point guy. He's not like an amazing elite passer, so maybe it's just a blip, and we'll look back and say, hey, 2023, they got a title. He came back from multiple years off and gave them all he had to get back. The next year was a little bit slower, and his body was just kind of readjusting. Maybe the calendar year of 2025, we feel like that's a distant memory, and he looks great again, and it could just be a momentary thing. But point is, if it does linger, it's not exactly easy to bet on paying him what would be 4 years, $210 million.
Exactly.
That's a big investment for somebody who, when you're literally seeing the evidence of what it looks like when he's anything less than 100% physically.
Puts Denver and Jokic in a very tough spot. Definitely something to monitor. My answer to your guys, I agree with you guys. It's Greece. The more I've thought about it, like Giddey hasn't played well enough where I'm excited about that as an upset pick. I don't really believe in France, as we've discussed. I think Canada, even if Murray's not playing well, is overwhelming. Just bet on Giannis. That kind of feels like the way if you're going to pick an upset here.
Well,
It'll be really cool.
I'm picking Australia.
Oh, you're picking Australia. Okay.
Yeah, that's my upset pick. I think all the favorites win, to be honest.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick an upset, I'm going Australia.
Any Team USA thoughts from you guys? Anything percolating for you guys on what's going on with Team USA right now? The only two, really, frankly, the most interesting thing for me with Team USA is Tyrese Halliburton being an incredible cheerleader, just like having the time of his life, being like the 12th guy on the bench. And Anthony Edwards at watching table tennis is one of the best things I've ever seen in my life.
The table tennis, Team USA basketball romance? Too strong of a word? I don't know. Is been very interesting to watch. And I was actually looking on Instagram the other day, and I was thinking, we never really got this kind of coverage from Team USA. We obviously got a little bit of the extracurriculars, but it was sort of reported in newspapers. It was sort of part of the broadcast of the game, where somebody with the social media team follows the team around and like, oh, cool, this is fun. But we're getting like legit video of people from the stands, from the arena, not stuff that's been broadcasted, talking about how like LeBron James has been at this thing for this competition. Anthony Edwards is at all these table tennis things. Bam Adebayo is watching fencing and all this stuff. And that part of the Olympic experience was not something I saw coming, but I thought it was been really interesting because it just sort of is an entry point for, I think, if you're just a basketball fan, maybe not a big Olympic fan, into all these other stories.
I mean, to me, like the most iconic video I could think of from previous Olympics, I was thinking about this to your point, is that video of like Chris Paul, Dwight Howard, Deron Williams, and LeBron James in like a Wendy's gas station combo.
Yeah.
And LeBron's like talking about like you can get your Wendy's and fuel up and like all this stuff. And like that's like the only like behind the scenes video I can really remember ever seeing.
That wouldn't even register. That would not even register this summer.
No, also LeBron eating at a Wendy's right now just feels like it's like LeBron in that particular environment at this point in his life, just like, or any of these guys, frankly, considering what we know about NBA guys in 2024 and like.
I could see Anthony Edwards in a Wendy's. I don't think.
But he's like
he'd
the
like,
only
I'm the
one
best
on
at eating Wendy's ever.
Well, you know he
Beckers
eats like
posted a photo of her and her brother at a Panda Express
shout out.
watching the women's national team eating some double entree plates. So
go get a crepe. You're in France. Go eat some snails. What are you doing
she's
at a
not.
Panda
I think
Express?
she's here. I think
Oh,
she just
okay.
because it was on the screen on their iPad as like a date to watch the event. But just the point is, the younger people can do things a little differently than LeBron.
True.
But I was talking to somebody about that Wendy's video. That would never, for all the reasons you guys said, but also like crazy people would just show up there in 2024 and like hurt them or try to, or like whatever. It would get out of hand incredibly quickly. That video is like an ancient relic at this point, even though it's only 12 years old.
I mean that's like 3-4 social media cycles ago. You know what I mean? It's like that was like flip phones and like
my Team USA observation is I'm taking it back. They are not going to be tested.
Okay, great. Well, welcome, Brendon. Team USA dominance is here. We're back.
What does tested mean, right?
I thought they would get the gold. The gold I thought was a foregone conclusion. I just don't even think there's going to be a close game anymore.
Yeah, I don't either. I was there after the first couple. I think they're beating Canada by like 15 in the final if that's where we go.
I don't know. I still feel like some sort of reversion to the mean has to happen, just sort of collectively in the USA versus world arena, where it just seems like some team is going to get hot from 3-point range. But maybe it doesn't matter. My takeaway right now is that Joel Embiid scored 15 points, and now nobody's talking about it anymore.
Congrats to Joel.
Yep.
Congrats to Joel Embiid. He made the right pick if he's trying to at least like have another thing on his Hall of Fame resume.
Where would he have played if he were to play for France?
I mean, Vic's playing the 3 at that point. We're just getting them all on the floor. It would have been insane, but I would have. Yeah, would have been great. Honest, like just for how weird it would have been. I would have woken up at 5 a.m. for that.
Would they have been the second favorite at that point? Because that still feels pretty clunky to me. I don't know. I honestly don't know that they're better. I think what ends up happening is Gobert.
I still think their lack of guard plays. We still would be talking about.
Yeah. You mean
Joel old and blah blah blah.
Joel backing down from like the mid post as an offensive initiator with like his Nick Batum Philly chemistry is not like doing it for you. Kenny Atkinson would absolutely be having an aneurysm drawing up sets as a France national assistant coach. Yes. Brendan pointed this out in our group text that Kenny Atkinson is just randomly the assistant coach for France. Who's the head coach of France?
Probably a French guy.
I think it's Neapolitan Bonaparte, something like that.
Neapolitan Bonaparte, not Napoleon Bonaparte.
That's
Neapolitan Bonaparte.
I never claimed to be a history buff. Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah, France. Look, France to me is they are coming because even though they're a
Oh,
little
okay.
old and in a transition right now with Vic being in his first Olympics and Rudy probably his last, you would think,
Yeah.
or last where he's making a big impact, and then Fournier and DeColo and everything. But they have this kid, Nolan Traore, who's going to be a lottery pick this year. Koulibaly, who you mentioned, Chris, is kind of waiting in the wings on the roster but not contributing.
And then
If
these
those
two
three
picks.
guys are all kind of in their prime next time, and maybe there's still a Gobert hanging on, or whatever, and then we haven't even said like the other 15 French dudes who were taken this year, who are all like forwards, Salon and Sar and
Rizichet.
everybody else.
Yeah, Ricochet.
They're gonna Ricochet. God, that's I think
Look,
that says a lot about this year's draft.
everyone has
that
forgotten.
name
We
escaped me.
we thought about the 2024 draft for like one day, and then we were all just like, we're good. Don't need to think about this again for a while. We're gonna like Zach Edey's rookie of the year odds are gonna go to like plus 700 after like 2 summer league games. Like that's the kind of class we're just staring at.
But 4 years feels pretty perfect for that group to be like, oh damn,
Yeah.
Vic in his absolute apex prime at like age 25 or whatever it'll be. All these other guys at least ready to contribute, and maybe a 1 or 2 pieces from this current era that's kind of ending still around. Like that will be up there against Team USA. The Americans will need to bring a team this good like they did in 2024 to compete with that. So maybe this is just the last time we all feel like no big deal. The Americans are going to dominate, because France at the very least, and that's not to mention, Canada will have Edey and everything else. So
Canada will be good.
it's coming.
It doesn't
it's
feel
just
like
not there yet.
it feels like Australia's pipeline is still pretty strong. We'll see. Germany, ditto for them. But yeah, it feels like France and Canada those are the teams that are coming for Team USA.
A lot of pressure on Cooper Flag to be the next big great American forward too, because there's kind of like that class of LeBron, Durant, those guys. It's all kind of age out.
Jason Tatum.
Like, wow, I
maybe
forgot about.
Maybe you can get Jaylen Brown on the team finally.
Yeah, maybe. We'll note that the French head
Zion
coach.
2028.
There it
Zion LA 2028.
Let's go. Honestly, the Olympics being I bet you the Olympics being in LA is a great sell for NBA players.
They'll get anybody they want. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll get players that were
There's
just
no
in the
commitment,
finals.
really.
It won't even matter. They'll just say
LeBron's like, I can.
That's where they all go anyway in the
Exactly.
summer. It's like, hey, do you want to play for America instead of with lethal shooter
pro-am.
in some gym?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We'll note that the French national team coach is Vincent Collet. I'm guessing it's Collet. It's Collet. He is the head coach of Metz 92, so he coached Vic's old team.
That program shuttered after Vic left it. Yeah.
Propping it up. Victor Wembanyama propping up local economies. All right, let's end on Gordon Hayward, guys. He retired last week. And here's my Gordon Hayward take. I think his injury is one of the most – it's in the top 10, 5 to 10 most consequential NBA things that has happened in the last decade. Think about the ripple effects. Number one, he leaves Utah. That clears the path for Donovan Mitchell to never – Donovan Mitchell and Gordon Hayward did not overlap in Utah. Donovan Mitchell's career probably looks different at the outset if Gordon Hayward is still in Utah. Number two, goes to Boston. It's this team up with Kyrie. It's like this new era of the Celtics. First game they play, he gets hurt. I was covering the Cavs at that point. I was on the road for my day job trip at that point. I was in a hotel in San Diego, and I remember watching it and just being like, holy. And I was texting friends at the arena that night, and they said it's like one of the eeriest things they've ever seen, understandably. And everyone was
definitely an NBA you remember where you were moment. I have the same thing. I remember the exact apartment, what room the TV would I can visualize it still, because it was so early in the game and it was opening night, so everybody's just seated, planted to watch that game.
Yeah, LeBron and Kyrie against it was like a whole thing.
Yeah.
Number two, Kyrie, the whole Kyrie Boston thing, it goes off the rails from the get-go. And it's not all because of the Gordon Hayward injury, but they were selling that as a partnership. Those guys wanted to play together. They wanted to link up in Cleveland at one point, all this stuff. That injury and what it meant for how Boston built and where they ultimately got to, winning the title this year, having a really good team, being, favorites next year, all that stuff. The plan was Gordon Hayward to be part of where that was going to go. It ends up becoming the Jays era. It looks very different. But that injury just had so many ripple effects for that Celtics team, for the rest of the league, that it's a sad reason for that to happen, and unfortunate for Hayward. But that injury is one of the most consequential random things that has happened in the last 10 years.
So I actually did a deep dive on this last week after the Gordon Hayward news was announced, And I think I disagree because I came from the same place of this was one of the biggest injuries. Because I think to our point, we all remember where we were. It felt so big in the moment. Gordon Hayward was having free agent meetings on the 4th of July weekend and making his decision. Like, that doesn't – like, Gordon Hayward, the one that the Sam Presti just called a mistake, that Gordon Hayward was doing free agent meetings on the 4th of July. So it was a big deal at the time. And then obviously with that first game, it felt so consequential. But I looked at it, and to your point already, it's not as if when he left, the Jazz got so bad that they were then positioned to take Donovan Mitchell, who became the face of the franchise going forward. They already had him. Gordon Hayward left. They drafted Donovan Mitchell, and it was sort of like a Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck kind of moment. It was like,
Yes.
okay.
Also, they didn't
good.
need to be that bad to get Donovan Mitchell because he fell so far. So
He was
they
a third-
really just got lucky with all of it. Yeah.
Exactly.
13th overall pick, Donovan Mitchell. And Gobert was like in the 20s, if I'm not mistaken.
So then you look at that Boston team, and I was like, well, yeah, Hayward getting hurt, that cleared the way for Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Not really. They were starting in that game. They were already starting. Now, maybe they got a few more shots because Gordon Hayward wasn't there, but they were going to play in their first 2 years. They were already anointed as starters. It's not like there was somebody in their way on the depth chart. They were already playing starters minutes, and it just sort of took off from there. Now, of course, you have all the what-ifs of what do the Celtics look like if Hayward never got hurt and Kyrie Irving was still there. Does he ever get traded? All these things, but I don't even know that all of that really matters all that much, you know? Like, it feels like the Gordon Hayward injury was a really big deal and a really big what-if for Gordon Hayward. And I don't even say this to, like, I'm not even trying to, like, knock the guy or make fun of the guy. It just sort of felt like right at that time, it felt like a way bigger thing than it actually was, because I do feel like most of the things that happened were just going to happen anyway. You know, I think that Celtics team with Kyrie and Gordon Hayward, not going to be good enough to win a championship. And that thing probably breaks up for one reason or the other anyway. You know?
Let me ask one counterpoint to this. That era of the East, post Kyrie trade to Boston, it's the end of the LeBron Cleveland era.
Mm-hmm.
That Cleveland team, that last LeBron year, it was a struggle for them to get to the finals that year. Boston pushed them very hard at the end without Kyrie, and I believe he was injured in that series. I just feel like there's like a window for them to make a finals like that year if Hayward's healthy. And like what I
think they beat Cleveland in the conference finals if Hayward's healthy because they almost did anyway, even without him or Kyrie. But
I mean, it took the Cavs 7 to beat Indiana in the first round that year, but it was a Bojan Bogdanovic LeBron duel in the first round. Like that's what we had.
but the Celtics weren't beating the Warriors. So,
no, but it's a finals appearance for the Jays early.
In that way, I agree with Wes. Where
it doesn't look exactly the same, but yeah, I think we kind of get to the same place that we got to. I actually did this comparison too between Gordon Hayward and Paul George, and I'm not going to do the whole thing because I did it on another show, but I just found it really interesting that Hayward was the 9th pick in the 2010 draft, and Paul George was the 10th pick in that same draft, and both of them suffered ridiculously impactful injuries earlier in their careers. Both of them were coming off of their All-Star seasons. Then the injury happened. Paul George, remember, during the Team USA practice, breaks his leg in half and has to miss a whole season and all these things. Gordon Hayward misses basically an entire season after injuring himself in the first game of that season. And then basically since then, since Gordon Hayward's major injury, he averaged 14.5 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists for the rest of his career. Since Paul George's major injury, 23.6 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists for the rest of his career. 7 All-Star appearances since the injury for Paul George, 4 All-NBA, finished 3rd in MVP in 2019. Gordon Hayward, obviously nothing close to any of that stuff, no All-Star appearances, etc., averaging 40 games played a season. Paul George, 64 games played per season. And here's the biggest thing. Gordon Hayward's going to retire having earned $273 million. A lot of money. He's fine. But Paul George, who just signed a 4-year, $212 million extension, again, from that same draft, where Gordon Hayward is announcing his retirement, Paul George is signing a max 4-year deal. Paul George is going to retire having earned $520 million. And I just find that crazy because there was a time where it was a real debate about Gordon Hayward or Paul George. That was a legitimate debate that you can have in the NBA. And the way that their careers just went completely different directions. Paul George, there's a world where his career ends up playing out like Gordon Hayward if his body doesn't miraculously bounce back from that injury the way that Gordon Hayward's just didn't do, right? And it's just, you never know what's going to happen with some of these injuries and the sliding doors that come with it.
Yeah, I had kind of forgotten that Boston brought Hayward off the bench for so much of the following season.
Mm-hmm.
looking back at his career stats, and it might not have just been tenable for a player of that caliber to do that, but it did just kind of, when a guy retires, you just do the what ifs and like we're doing now. And I was like, well, what if he had just become like a great sixth man kind of connective piece
Like an
after
Iguodala
that
type.
on all of these other teams? Could he have prolonged things a little bit more? Because he just became this guy where you just knew he's going to miss 30 games or more every single season. But I don't know if it had to be that way. Obviously, it's all just guessing. You're talking about some guy's knee and whatever. But it's like it's interesting. Yeah, the shout out to the Ball podcast. They love to make the joke about treating Mark Bartelstein like an absolute god, and in the case of Gordon Hayward, he absolutely was godlike in the ability to get Gordon Hayward bag after bag after bag, even after these injuries, and only one All-Star appearance, even with all of that said. So, congrats to Gordon for having no reason to continue playing basketball after age 33 in an awful postseason in Oklahoma City, because he has more money than any of us can ever dream of, despite all these what-ifs we're talking about.
And one of the most he is one of the most iconic college basketball moments of the last several years. Like him and Butler on that team was like a moment. I mean, I was in high school. It was like a big deal that him and Brad Stevens did that. I remember that just being something I was really into. Probably partially white kid from the suburbs being into Gordon Hayward at Butler. It just feels correct to some degree.
Well, they just came out of absolutely nowhere.
Yes.
I didn't even know what that school was. And then not only did they do it once, but they did it again after he left. And that was definitely a moment. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So au revoir is that au revoir goodbye in French? I don't know. Goodbye to Gordon Hayward. Made a lot of money. Forgot about him and Paul George. So that's a great pull to have. That's a really weird parallel. It's like a really eerie kind of random parallel, but happens sometimes.
Born 40 days apart.
Wow. And they just did Podcast P together. Full circle.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, guys? Any Olympic thoughts? Anything else you're watching before we get out of here?
Got a personal question for you.
Let's do it, Wes.
Chicken wings. We all love them. We all eat them. They exist. Standard bar food, bar fare.
Yeah.
Football season is coming up. It's time to start thinking about your chicken wings, folks, because that is the number one
Is this
option.
a commercial?
It is a commercial for chicken wings. I could actually say what's your number one football food, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to go right to the chicken wing, and I'm going to ask you because I had chicken wings over the weekend, and I really enjoyed them, and it got me thinking about how much I love chicken wings. And I actually heard that my wife has a friend who said that she prefers her chicken wings less crispy and likes the rubbery texture that a chicken wing can sometimes have. Okay, and based off of your face, so people that are just listening and not watching on YouTube, Chris and Brendan have the right take, and they are saying that is absolutely insane. I don't know why anybody would think that. That said, your ideal chicken wing, what does it look like? What does it taste like? What are we talking about here?
Okay, so yeah, first of all, if I'm eating one that has the consistency you just described, I'm a little bit worried I'm going to get salmonella or something.
Exactly.
So I'm not loving the idea of actively pursuing that. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm not imaginative enough, but I'm not picky really. It does need to be a little bit spicy, but I don't care how we get there. Like that could be a little Asian type of spice. That can be something more in the Mexican, Spanish family, a little more like a salsa type of energy, or obviously just straight up buffalo. My favorite is probably barbecue hot, a little bit of sweet, a little bit of spicy together. And I am a drumsticks over
Good.
flat type guy.
In terms of your spice level, do you want what spice level are we trying to get to? Do you want to just feel it in the back of your throat, or are you trying to get a tier? Do you want some
No,
snot
I'm not
coming
trying to
out?
punish myself. No.
All right, no punishing.
Like,
just
chicken
you want to
wings
feel
is
a
like-
little something.
Yeah, I want it. It's more for flavor, but some foods I'm fine to go crazy with on the spice, but I'm trying to enjoy myself. I'm at a party. I'm with friends. I'm not trying to sit there and be like an absolute disaster at the table. So
Right.
yeah, just a little. How about you, Chris?
So I want a buffalo. Buffalo wings are great,
Classic.
and we don't need to mess with I'll try different sauces. I'll try different seasonings. I do like lemon pepper. Incredible. If you get a really well done, good well made lemon pepper wing, pretty incredible. to Brennan's points, a spicy barbecue, also very good. I'll take an Asian zing. But just a buffalo wing, a Miller Lite. Like the beer with this is vital.
It's important.
I want some. I don't really have a strong take between flats and drums. Like I just like them both. Like just give me like a basket of wings and it's
You're
fine.
not specifying because some places will say, "Hey, if you give us another $1, we'll do all one of the other."
Nah,
Like,
that's
a ripoff. It's a ripoff. It is.
Just let me just eat some wings. I want celery. I want carrots, and I want some blue cheese.
Oh, Brendon, blue cheese or ranch?
Ranch, and I'm not going to be angry if they give me carrots and celery, but I probably won't eat it.
I
got
eat
a lot
the
of
carrots.
myself
I don't eat the
sometimes, you know?
celery. The problem with the celery, sometimes you get it like a day old and it's a little rubbery,
Yeah,
and I don't
that-
eat it.
that's-
unless
it's
that,
that- and, like,
unless that
that-
celery is snapping, I don't
Yeah,
eat
that-
it. I always eat the carrot though. It's a nice like palate cleanser in between
Yeah.
certain things. And I'm
They-
all the way blue cheese.
The square carrot. That's
Yeah.
the classic. I don't know really where that came from
It
or
only
why,
exists
but
in the chicken wing.
if it's
bin.
circular, I don't want it. I need that to be a square. Yeah.
Yeah. The celery, when there's like that, you know the first bite when it doesn't quite snap and there's a little weird taste on your tongue. It's when you know you're kind of in trouble with the celery.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's why I avoid celery altogether. I don't do it with peanut butter. I don't do it by itself. I'm anti-celery. Period. Not just with wings.
celery is a precarious vegetable.
Is it even a vegetable? I don't even know what it is.
Pretty sure
I think
it's a vegetable.
it's got to be a vegetable.
Feels like
It's
one of
not-
those things we are like scientifically able to eat without dying, but there's no need to eat it.
Right.
You know?
Exactly.
It's edible, and that's like the extent of what's good about it.
It's
Yeah.
a vehicle for peanut butter mostly, but you could also just eat peanut butter. Spoon is a vehicle for peanut butter as well. My answer is I prefer the buffalo wing. I will try a lemon pepper, but you've got to really talk me out of other type of. You got to really talk me into other wing flavors. I will try anything that's hot, but it has to be a hot base. Doesn't have to be buffalo, but like I'm not really into barbecue wings. I'm not really into some of these other like weird, not spicy flavor. It has to be the base level. The point of it has to be a hot sauce. So I'll try a bunch of different kinds, fruity ones, whatever. It's fine. But the base thing has to be a hot sauce. And then with blue cheese, I order my wings everywhere I go extra crispy because I never trust it. Because if it comes out a little rubbery, then it ruins my day. So you always order extra crispy.
It's funny you say that because my dad he is a longtime restaurant owner. He worked as a consultant for a no free ads, but a certain chain of sports bars that everyone is aware of. Everywhere we go, if we get wings, could be a dive
Applebee's.
bar, not Applebee's.
Okay.
Buffalo
Wild Wings.
I figured that was my
I
guess.
know.
Yeah. Okay.
I was just.
Okay, Brandon's got me to say it. If we go anywhere, could be a B-Dubs. It could be a bar, like a local bar. It could be like there's a place in Cleveland. I just forget for them. Good Company that does like smoked wings that are like they smoke them for like a day and they're
I
incredible.
like a smoke wing. Yep.
No matter where we go, he asks for his wings extra crispy because
Take it from the pros.
or if we'll make them at home during football season sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
If we'll air fry them.
Yep.
He will air fry. He will follow the recipe and then do it like another 6 minutes to make sure that crisp.
I've air fried
is
the
there.
wings. I have no problem with air fried wings. It's a little bit healthier for you because obviously you don't have all the grease involved. Yeah, you got to go extra crispy on those wings.
Question: how do we feel about boneless? Just as a.
I have no
concept.
problem with chicken tenders.
Yeah.
But don't call them boneless wings because they're not.
Yeah,
boneless wings are.
They're chicken chunks.
They're for quitters. I actually don't respect anybody.
Breaded chicken chunks. Yeah.
I have zero respect for anybody who orders boneless wings. Just get the chicken tenders.
Yeah, to your point about non-spicy sauces, honey barbecue.
Not a fan.
Not really.
Yeah.
It starts to get me in my head because I'm like, okay, so this is breaded chicken with sugar rubbed all over it, and then I'm dipping it in old milk creamy ranch. You know what I mean?
Right.
Nothing about this is a wing. Nothing about this is a buffalo wing. We are so far from what we started with
Right.
that I think we need to just take a few steps back and get back to basics.
Might as well put it in some rice and call it orange chicken. Call it a day.
You also just
let's
you feel.
just make it what it is. Yeah, chicken
I'm
tender,
also
great.
I'm also gonna feel like a little like kind of after I eat wings. If I eat boneless wings, I'm gonna feel like more worse. Like it's gonna because it's more sugary. It's more the breading. It's like it's the whole thing. Well, and on this, how far do you think you guys could get on hot ones before you wanted to die?
I could finish it. I've had the bomb sauce. It was not pleasant, but I've done that to my body, and I know I can get through it.
I don't know if I could.
I've never pushed myself that close, but I do live in Arizona where I've had plenty of spicy salsas and hot sauces and not wing buffalo related type things, but it's an art out here to see how crazy you can go with different chilies.
I think you can get through
stuff
it
like that. So I think I could do it.
Yeah, you've got it in your blood. You can do it.
Yeah, I'm a Scandinavian blooded guy from Ohio. I'm kind of fucked if I'm being honest. Like it's not. I'm getting like 4, and I'm like, you know, we're a little tough. It's not great for me. But I would like to try one day.
Grinds pepper on Chris's salad, and he has to get some milk.
You know, I put Cholula in everything on my eggs every day. We got like a base. I've like worked the palate up, but. I did have a Chinese chicken dish a couple weeks ago that was so hot that I like could not eat it. So
they'll do that to you sometimes.
Yeah, the woman who owned the restaurant looked at me with some pity in her eyes. So that was tough for me.
You probably saw it coming when you ordered it.
She's like, "Oh, white boy, screwed." It's in Ohio. It's tough. All right, we're gonna end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Brendon Kleen. That's Wes Goldberg. Back later this week with more Just Basketball. Enjoy the Olympics. We'll talk to you soon.